Oh, but we have not come to blame Canada. We've come to praise her.
It's a good song choice, though.
When you're talking about Canada, I mean, apologies to Neil Young and Bryan Adams and Joni Mitchell and Corey Hart and Honeymoon Suite. You got to go with Blame Canada. It just sets the right mood. Welcome. This is the Fright Club Podcast.
I'm Hope Madden.
And I'm George Wolf, and we're from madwolf.com talking about the best in Canadian horror this week. Because we love Canada.
We do love
Canada. Sometimes known as America's hat.
No, not really.
On some T-shirts I have seen. But some good horror imports from Canada to talk about. But first, we got to say a huge thank you to our buddy Neil, our favorite and senior Stephen King correspondent for last week's podcast.
That's right.
It went over pretty darn well.
And yeah, Dr. Neil McRobert. And I think that what we've learned maybe from this, first of all, he has a really awesome accent and he sounded great. But also, I think maybe people like when there is an opinion that isn't really mine overwhelming an episode. So,
what's good is I think that's sometimes that is to our detriment, I think, is that we agree so often.
Yeah.
You know, it's good to get differing opinions.
Some conflict, a
little bit. And we didn't come to blows at all.
No.
But he had some great things to say because obviously he's done a lot of studying of Stephen King. So he had a lot of insight that we didn't through the books and how the movies treated them and why or why not, or why he liked them or didn't and thought they were successful. And sometimes they were different than what we thought.
Yeah.
So that was great. We had a lot of people chime in that it was the best podcast we've done yet. I have to agree. In fact, I told you that.
Yeah, you did.
When I was mixing it after we got done talking to Neil and I was mixing it all down with the sound clips and everything, I said, you know what? This was probably the best one. So with that, we're retiring. Thank you. No, that was awesome. So Neil, thank you. Thank you for the great feedback. Everybody chiming in about it. Everybody seemed to like it. So not only is it a really good topic, because Stephen King, especially The Shining, is always good to talk about, but he had such great things to say. So thank you to Neil. Thank you for the feedback to everybody. Keep it coming as always. But we are moving on, and we'll try to keep those standards just as high,
right?
As we talk about Canadian horror this week. So overall, do you just have any thoughts, top of your head, when you think about Canadian horror? What comes to mind? What's their trademark?
Well, here's the thing. Almost any movie can be considered Canadian horror because so many people film in Canada because it's so much less expensive and they have, so I felt like I needed to clarify that the films that we're going to talk about today, they were filmed in Canada and they were also made by Canadians. So that's the main thing that's going to separate these. Because if you were to Google, Canadian horror films, you're going to get everything that comes up. And that's not what our goal was, is, some American films that were filmed in Canada. That's what we were looking for. We're looking for actual Canadian filmmakers making horror films.
So that's where it starts. Canadian filmmakers.
Yes. Okay. And they're filming in Canada. So for example, Cronenberg was probably the most famous Canadian filmmaker, but at a certain point in his career, he kind of stopped filming in Canada. He kind of came south, films here. So we're going to focus mainly on his actual Canadian output.
Okay. We always have to establish the rules.
That's right.
Establish the guidelines first before we move on. But that seems fair because, so many that you might think of, that some people might think, well, that's a Canadian film. You would say, well, maybe not.
Right.
And vice versa. So that's good. So those are the ground rules. So let's get at it. Number 5, this is one from just last year, and somehow this one slipped through the cracks because this was a new one to me, but I love the title. It's called Bloody Knuckles.
With freedom comes great responsibility. Very unfortunate that some choose to exploit their freedoms to cause harm and disrespect.
What the fuck?
You destroyed our comics.
I've gone crazy.
Time to get your balls back.
What the fuck did you do? They'll kill us all.
I want Comic Book Boy brought to me. This insolence ends tonight.
So this is a fun one, and I have to admit that there was kind of a battle for number 5, and this is really new, and probably most people haven't had the chance to see it, I would guess, because I think it sort of just recently jumped off the festival circuit, and I think that you can get it online, and you can get the DVD at this point. So it's a story of a comic book artist whose Vulgarian Invasion comics are very underground and very inflammatory, and they at one point he writes a big comic book making fun of local thug Mr. Fong, who takes issue and cuts off the offending hand, the drawing hand, right? But drawing hand comes to life and really spends most of its time beating up the artist for being a wussy and giving up on his dream of upsetting the establishment. And it's really just a big sort of mash note to free speech is what this movie is. And it's very, very low budget. And it just reminds you of Troma. That's what it reminds you of, the best of Troma films. Just very underground and in your face and funny and gross. And given the subject matter, appropriately non-PC. But what's funny about Canadian films is that even the ones that are really, really inflammatory, they all seem so polite about it. So this one, I mean, it's almost adorably un-PC, this movie, but it's really fun and really funny. And, some of the comic book characters sort of come to life. Like he's drawn these really provocative comic book characters, but people have sort of embraced that. And so there's, some really funny characters, especially toward like the halfway mark it's fun. It's really fun. It's gross. It's lowbrow, very in your face, but super fun.
Yeah, it had that look about it. And I have to say, it reminded me right away, and I wish I could remember the title, but growing up, my mom always said the movie that scared her the most as a kid, and then she saw Psycho, and she was, older when she saw Psycho, which scared her. But as a kid, it was some movie about a disembodied hand, and I was looking it up, and I don't think it was The Hand. There's not a movie called The Hand that was old enough to be that movie, but whatever it was, she said that just scared the bejesus out of her. That there was this hand crawling around, and it certainly didn't have the fun vibe that Bloody Knuckles does. But I think you're right. The look of the hand is just disgusted with the man.
Yes, absolutely.
Which I think is funny.
Yeah, absolutely. And really just beats the tar out of him in several different scenes that are pretty hilarious, actually. Of course, it's really obviously just the actor throwing himself against a cupboard and stuff like that, but it's really very funny. And
the guy, the director, Matt O, is that what he goes by? Just Matt O?
Apparently, he used to be Matt O'Mahony, and but now he's just Matt O. That's how he's billed in this movie. So, and it's like the movie, just no time for extras. Just gets right at it. It's just,
No time for a complete last name.
No time.
Let's just get to it.
Let's just. No time.
Yeah, and it has the, you say it's low budget. To me, it didn't look ultra low budget. I mean, it certainly looked like they didn't have a massive, Hollywood budget, but they get by.
Yeah, he does a really good job with clear limitations. The acting isn't awesome, but it's not, given the parameters, the type of film it is, it's not bad either. I mean, the acting is considerably better than what you would find in a Troma film. It reminds you of Troma, only better.
It seemed a little bit very first Evil Dead.
Yeah, I can see that. But I have to admit that much as I really did enjoy this film, it almost didn't make the list because there's this one phenomenally weird 80s movie out of Canada, and our senior gay correspondent John Tice is with me on this. We love this movie. I can't say it's good, and I can't fully recommend it, but I can't get it out of my head. So the film that almost made number 5 is called Pin, and it's about sort of these very sheltered, overprotected brother and sister whose father is a doctor, and he uses his anatomically correct medical doll to teach them lessons. So he throws his voice, and this anatomically correct, full-sized male doll babysits for the kids and teaches them lessons about life. And the girl, she has her own specific response to that as she gets older.
I bet.
Yeah. And the boy just goes insane. He's just insane because he believes, and they call him Pin because when they were kids, short for Pinocchio, like the doll that comes to life. And the boy believes that he is real, and so it's got kind of a psycho thing where he's killing people, but he thinks it's Pin who's killing people. And it's the weirdest movie. It's the weirdest movie. And so for that reason, I think I have to recommend it.
Okay, but not enough to get it a fuzzy math top 6, top 5. You just want to say that it's out there.
That's right. I'm not, because the thing is, it's not a good movie, not by a far stretch. It's just so bizarre that it really compels interest. I just feel like you should see it anyway, even though you're kind of sort of going to hate it. But on the other hand, you're kind of going to be glad you watched it, I think. And I think John Tice agrees.
Well, now you've got the curiosity factor up. So
absolutely.
Everybody's going right now, Penn, I got to see this thing. Good Lord.
Yeah. And you know what? Honestly, I think you can find the entire thing. I think you can find the whole movie on YouTube. So
right.
that way you're not wasting cash on it.
Okay, so we're talking about it's a, what would you call it? Honorable mention, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's
or
right.
Or dishonorable mention. A mention. Let's put it that way. So it's kind of resting comfortably between number 5 and number 4. In that little no man's land. But we will go up to number 4. One is definitely a favorite here, and it's from 2012, American Mary.
Want to be a doctor?
Surgeon. I'm changing specialties, Dr. Grant. Have you ever heard of body modification? Do you think I'm crazy?
So twins and Canadians, Jen and Sylvia Soska, yeah, they make
your buddies.
That's right, my buddies. You know that they had to make this list. And American Mary, which is it's ironically titled, right? Because it's clearly set in Canada. They never call her American Mary. My guess is that originally it was supposed to be called Bloody Mary, and they realized there were too many movies called Bloody Mary, so they settled on something else.
Yeah, that's a good theory.
Yeah, it's my working theory. You know, it's about a med student who needs money, and she finds herself drawn into this world of sort of bizarre, intentional cosmetic surgery.
Yeah.
Like people who want horns, or people who want new orifices, or just people who want really crazy surgeries. And that's how she starts paying the bills. And yet one of the doctors, you know, at the school assumes that she's a prostitute now. And so bad things happen to her, and she is not the person to do bad things to, because she's got a specific set of skills.
Right. And this one, in a way, and I know we've talked about this before, but the people that haven't heard that podcast, this is, for me anyway, looking at your reaction to it, is a little bit different, because often you don't like the revenge fantasy horror, and this one goes down that road.
It does. It's an interesting movie, regardless of that particular. And I don't always hate that, but it's certainly not my favorite element in a movie. But it's very the movie is very like an inside out noir. You know, where you've got the raven haired dame who's nothing but trouble, but she's our point of view character, is rather than having like the tough guy who shouldn't get mixed up with her be our point of view character. So it gives the whole thing sort of a fresh, interesting feel, and it's borderline horror until like the third act.
Yeah.
You know, it takes its time getting where it's going. It develops characters. It develops this very, very weird atmosphere, this very strange group of people, but they're fascinating because of that. And then when it goes horror, it's like, yeesh.
But that is right there is a thing that I think so many, not just horror films, so many films in general get wrong. If you rush it, then it doesn't have the resonance. Make it a gradual descent into this world, and a gradual descent into how horrific this woman's situation is going to become, and how she's going to react to it. The slow burn to me makes it that much better. Yeah,
no, I agree with you. And Catherine Isabel plays Mary, and we're going to talk about her again later on this podcast. And she's just magnificent. And it's interesting because in the very beginning of the film, she's a weirdo. She's a freak. She's like sewing up chicken carcasses as she's preparing for some class. But the film has her as like a human being right on the verge, like on the verge. She's out of money, but she's got this talent, and she knows what she wants to be. And it's an interesting way the Soska sisters develop that and then take it places, because it's like, it could go any way right now. Like right now is it's a very crossroads moment for her. Where's it going to go? And then you would never guess every place that it leads, nor does she guess every place that it leads. And it's just a really well developed, smartly written, interesting film.
So there's definitely some empowering themes in there as well.
Yeah, I think so. Or take control. Certainly don't be victimized.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
But I think you're right. The performances, the lead performance in general. What'd you say her name was?
Catherine Isabel.
Yeah, very, very impressive. But yeah, the mood, the atmosphere, the slow burn that we talked about before makes it more effective when it gets to where it's going. Yeah.
And there are a couple of nods to other Canadian horror films in this one, which I appreciate, because it's not like they're nods to just generally speaking horror films. They're not. They are nods specifically to Canadian horror films, which I thought was nice.
And what are the sisters up to these days? Do we know?
They did a couple of shorts that were in some of the, like the ABCs of Death 2. They had one in there, and actually, one of the stars of American Mary is in their short for ABCs of Death 2, and then they did See No Evil 2, which I think was just directed to VOD. I don't think it ever had a theatrical release, but that's with Danielle Harris.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Scream Queen.
Yeah.
Danielle Harris.
She kicked some ass in that one.
Well, a quick look at IMDb says, as far as directing, they did one earlier this year that we completely missed called Vendetta. Looks like a detective pushed beyond his limits. So not a horror movie, kind of a thriller. So we missed that completely, but that was what they did earlier this year.
We will have to find it.
We will have to check it out. Doesn't look like a horror movie, but still can be good. You never know. So that is number 4, American Mary from 2012 on our list of Canadian horror. And this was one that kind of freaked us out when we first saw it. And I think must have been on a list of movies that just got it on our radar.
Right.
That we had to seek it out. And it's definitely interesting and one worth checking out. Number 3 on our list from 97. It's called Cube.
Does anybody remember how they got here?
Why would they throw innocent people in here? Are we being punished?
There's a way in here, so there's gotta be a way out.
Do you think they'd go to all the trouble to build this thing if we could just walk out?
Take a good long look around. Cause I got a feeling it's looking at us.
We have about 3 days without food and water before we're too weak to move.
I just want to wake up.
You're not getting out of here.
Yes, we are! There is no way out of here!
We need to get around the traps.
They're identified by prime numbers.
Figure it out.
I can't!
I'm not dying in a rat maze!
We have the key. The cube is us.
So this is one where, as you could tell from the trailer, you've got some people thrown into almost like a huge Rubik's Cube kind of thing, a deadly Rubik's Cube with all sorts of traps and moving pieces, and they have to find a way out. They have to use their wits to find a way out. And it's, if you saw the one Alien Predator movie, they had kind of the same, there's a sequence in there where they're in rooms, they're trapped in a room that moves, and then it'll move like a prism and then open up a completely new room that you might be in. It's kind of that same deal, but it certainly has a lot of traps laid for them. But there is a way out if they're smart enough to figure it out. And it's interesting where it goes. Sort of a low-budget look to it, I think, but interesting. Yeah,
one of the things I need to just admit is that, so the director, Vincenzo Natali, he's actually from Michigan, but he was educated in Toronto, and he makes all of his films out of Canada. So that's how this made the list, because it's a great movie. And it's in the way that they collect random strangers, right? It predates Saw, but it's got a very Saw feel about it in that particular sense, is that they collect these people. You're not sure why exactly, but they have a task in front of them and they don't know what it is. And if they don't succeed, they're going to die. So,
right.
If Saw is compelling to you for that reason, I think that you would probably like Cube. One of the reasons there are 2 reasons why this movie I find so incredibly freaky. One is because I'm profoundly claustrophobic and it has you trapped inside a windowless, there's nothing. Oh, that completely freaked me out the entire time. But then the other thing is just the knowledge that as soon as they say prime numbers, I realized, oh, I'm going to die then. I realized, I think 20 minutes in, I would be one of the people who didn't survive it. Like, I don't have what it takes to make it out of this. So that's sad for me.
Yeah. And there are, not only is it obviously claustrophobic, just from the very nature of it, but the way it's shot, the different traps they come up with. Saw comes to mind, but I think we talked before, Saw kind of has always left me cold, although the first one is all right, I suppose. But anyway, they get some inventive kills, I guess, is what I'm going for.
Yeah.
And how they, the people slowly start catching on to the certain way that it's done, and certain things that will cause the cube to move, to go in motion, and to trigger things off. It's interesting how they slowly come around to it.
It is, and how after a while the individual characters have a sense of why they're there. And it's not like, unlike Saw, it's not some sin they've committed. It's actually some skill that they have, is why that the people have been collected. And then it's just interesting, the longer it wears on, the more it gets to them. Who is willing to help another person? Who is willing to do damage to another person? And actually in the end, who is willing to do damage to themselves? I mean, it starts off as just this claustrophobic horror, and it winds up sort of a really interesting character study about this group of people. it sort of upends a lot of horror film cliches where you sort of feel like, well, this guy represents this, so he's going to make it, or this guy, you know what I mean? It's very, I think, unpredictable in that way, in who survives and who doesn't survive. A lot of times I think when you watch a movie like this, you feel like you can figure it out for yourself. This could be the first to die, this will be the second, and not the case in this one.
And originally, I guess there is an alternate ending.
Ooh.
Yeah, that we haven't seen. I think it was from what I've read, the director's original ending that he scrapped. And I don't want to give too many spoilers away because I did like the ending.
Me too.
In this movie. The way once they... Boy, I don't want to give... But
I like the ending.
I did like the ending, but if you do some reading on it, and I don't know whether the original ending is out there on YouTube. I haven't found it, but you can read about what the original ending was intended, and I think if you're like us, you'll agree that he was right to go with the ending that he went with. Let's put it that way, without giving away too much. But it gets fascinating and tense. The acting has its hits and misses.
Right.
Some are better than others, and that's why maybe that's what I mean by saying it looks a little
low rent.
Low rent. Yeah, but it's almost one to me. I'm kind of surprised it hasn't been remade.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because of all, because it's been, when did we say it came
97.
out? 97. So there you go.
Yeah.
It's been long enough, and it's under the radar enough that you could do a big budget one with all sorts of CGI or all sorts of special effects with the cube.
You could totally ruin it.
Exactly right. You could totally ruin it. So forget I even said anything. No, but just on how things get remade, I'm kind of surprised that it didn't. But definitely worth checking out if you haven't already. So we'll call it a Canadian film.
Yes, because
even though
he
he's from
lives
Michigan.
there and he's been educated there and he makes all of his movies there. And so, we're going to... And then, another one the same guy made about a dozen years later that I didn't really make the list, but I think is worth mentioning is Splice.
Oh, yeah.
That's you're going there.
That
movie.
is a hot mess, isn't it? Yeah, and I just realized I should have said that stayed up north. Because we're not allowed to say that word. But Splice. Wow, that was him?
It was.
Woo!
It was.
Yeah, we saw that in the theater, didn't we?
We did.
And we were like,
So you went there then. Wow.
Oh, but that gets off the list a little bit. Let's get back on it. Number 2 on our list of best Canadian horror. This one has come up in our conversations as well, several times for good reason. From 2000, Ginger Snaps.
All it takes is one night and one bite.
Let's get out of here.
Ginger's changing.
How do you feel? Wicked.
They're just being normal teenage girls.
Yeah, this one has been a favorite. It may sound familiar because it popped up on our best werewolf list.
And the best feminist.
It popped up on our best feminist list because it's both. It uses the werewolf, I don't want to say analogy, the werewolf metaphor.
Right.
There you go. To use women growing up, women coming into their womanhood, and makes it very interesting take on these gingers.
Yeah, it's so many horror films. It's just about that. It's just this sort of hyper panic about the onslaught of womanhood. I mean, there are the number of films that's the core concept are legion, and this one, first of all, is very, very funny in the way it does it, but also, as we mentioned before, the werewolf is almost always linked to men. So the fact that they just use the exact same metaphor to articulate a female coming of age, I thought was fascinating and very subversive.
And it's almost like, why did it take so long?
Right.
Yeah. But it works on, there's humor, there's dark humor, there's subversive humor, and it's very smartly written and well acted.
Yeah, and funny.
It is funny.
It's just so clever, and it's just the entire film is littered with just fun puns, visual puns, excellent lines. And the two characters, so it's two sisters who are outcasts in their high school. They hate everybody in their high school, which is a feeling that the high school basically returns to them. And on the night of Ginger's period, her first period, the curse. Because she also is bitten by a werewolf. And it's in that way, in a lot of ways, because it's very much a high school horror movie. It conjures Carrie a lot. It's just somebody with very, very late with their period, and then something else visits them at the same time. But Mimi Rogers plays the girl's mother, and she's hilarious. Just the whole movie is really funny. It's scary, and it's clearly fairly low budget, but I think and low budget plus werewolf does not go together very well usually. But I think they do a nice job in working around it.
Some do. I mean, Dog Soldiers pulled it off, and this one does. And I think another thing this movie does well that can be a trap for a lot of movies. There's a point where you can take self-aware too far.
Yeah.
And it becomes almost parody, almost no, you don't get it. But they don't.
Right.
They're self-aware enough to make it a little wink wink, not too much, but to know that they realize the genre they're working in, and they're not making fun of it, but they're taking it in smart, different directions, almost in a subversive way, as you say.
Yeah. And there are two sequels, and we've always mentioned the two sequels as well every time we talk about this, because they're surprisingly solid, and they are Canadian, although John Fawcett, who directed the original, doesn't direct either of the sequels. More importantly, I think, Karen Walton, who wrote the original, she does not write the sequels.
Yeah.
And it's, as you say all the time, it always starts with the writing.
Always.
The writing is so clever on this. But, I mean, they're both worth seeing. One is an immediate sequel, right? Ginger Snaps Unleashed, which just here's what happens next. And then the other is this weird flashback to like the 1800s, frontiers life with like ancestors of the girls. And it's interesting too. I mean, neither one of them are complete rock stars like the original, but they're both worth seeing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And weirdly enough, they both came out the same year. They both came out in 2004.
That is weird. That's very weird. But number 2 on our list, the original Ginger Snaps. And that takes us up to number 1, a legendary director, a film that has become a cult classic.
Absolutely.
And it's the top of our list from 1983, all the way back, Videodrome.
Max Wren is a victim.
I woke up with a headache.
He has been exposed to Videodrome.
I've been hallucinating for a while, ever since...
What?
Since I first saw Videodrome.
Soon, his visions will coalesce and become uncontrollable flesh. Television can change your mind. Videodrome will change your body.
Long live the new flesh.
I almost feel like I have to explain why, of all the Cronenberg options, we picked Videodrome, right? Although a lot of you are probably thinking, well, yes, that's an excellent choice. But others are going, where's Scanners, right? Where's Dead Ringers, right? Where's Rabid? Where's Shivers? I mean, he did so many. But so Videodrome was the last fully Canadian film that he made. And I think the last full, true, 100% horror film that he made. The Fly came next. Clearly a Hollywood film. It was made here in the States, big budget, big actors. It's horror sci-fi, right? Dead Ringers. He's even said he doesn't think that Dead Ringers is a horror movie. Although
I was going to say
I've made an argument against that. And then he did, and then he moved on. He did Naked Lunch, and he did, and the things that he's done most recently, some masterpieces, but not horror films.
Maps of the Stars.
Maps of the Stars. Eastern Promises.
Oh yes.
He's a brilliant all-time favorite. And I also only wanted to choose one because I felt like we could easily do an entire podcast on just Cronenberg, which we no doubt will do at some point. So I just wanted to choose one. I think that if you compare Videodrome to the rest of his early work, his Canadian work, his strictly horror film work, it has the best cast. It has the most compelling storyline. It looks the best. I mean, it's the most, I think, professional. But he doesn't lose any of those Cronenbergisms. I mean, it's incredibly weird.
Yeah.
And he's completely preoccupied with the human body and with technology simultaneously, So while there are really great arguments for a whole bunch of his other movies, this is why I chose Videodrome, and this is why Videodrome is at the top.
And you rest your case. The funny thing I remember about this, it came out when I was a senior in high school, and the talk was that Debbie Harry was in him because Debbie Harry was still on top of the world.
Yeah.
In
1983,
she was.
Yeah, she was.
Yeah. So that was the big thing. It was almost like back when the movie version of Tommy came out. And even though Elton John had such a small part, it was Elton John stars in Tommy. No, not quite. So Debbie Harry, not the star, but if you'd look at even at the old movie poster, she gets a bigger bill than James Woods does.
And if you're not familiar with the movie, James Woods is, as he always is, he's just like a creepy executive, but in this case he works for it's a TV station, like a pirate TV station, and he believes he stumbled across a snuff TV show out of Malaysia, I think, and he thinks this is the future. If he can just pirate that to his TV station, people will stay up all night and watch people stumble into this warehouse and be murdered in front of them. And then it gets weird. Like, that's not weird enough,
that's
right?
Not, yeah.
Well, it's all a corporate conspiracy, right? And it's the TV waves are giving people brain tumors that's making them hallucinate, or is it really changing everything? And is there really a VCR in James Woods' belly?
Yeah, and there's that classic sequence of him and the TV.
Oh, yeah.
That has become iconic. And, when you think about when this came out and with the technology at the time, you know what? He had a lot of very, very clear things to say that you look back on it now and think, you know what? Those thoughts have held up pretty well.
Oh, yeah. And in terms of he has always been, he's very clinical in his I think approach to bodily horror.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then I think when you watch The Fly toward the end, where he becomes the machine, where he and the machine become one thing, clearly that started here, and it's just I think a fascination that Cronenberg must have, that I don't think if somebody just presented it to me, I would think, that doesn't sound very interesting. But then when you watch it, you're like, oh my God, what the hell is going on right there? Did he just pull a gun out of his belly? And it's just. Yeah, it's a fascinating, incredibly bizarre, so bizarre that I think in most hands it wouldn't have worked. But Cronenberg just knows exactly what he's doing. He has a vision unlike anybody else's, and he just always sees it through. And for me, even though I might prefer to watch something like, I'd rather watch The Brood, or I'd rather watch Shivers, like on a Saturday afternoon. I think that Videodrome, to that point in his career, was probably his most accomplished work.
Mm-hmm. And today, the message holds up.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
It really does, especially when you think about the year that he was making that and putting that message out there. So number 1, Canadian horror, David Cronenberg's Videodrome. And that sets us up for, we've talked about in the future, looking at the works of just one director. So he's probably on the list, but not. We're going to go somewhere else first, right?
Yeah, I think the first one we're going to do next week is Takashi Miike, because weirdly enough, we have almost never talked about any of his movies. I don't know how that's possible.
That is weird.
Yeah, because we're huge fans of his.
Oh yeah.
And so we're gonna dedicate next week's podcast to the 5 best films of Takashi Miike.
Good stuff. There'll be some people that are beaten up.
Yes,
pretty good.
There's some folks who can take abuse.
Definitely. And so that's next week. Also, if you're in the Central Ohio area, we want to invite you out on the 11th, November 11th. It's the next date of our next Fright Club live event going on at the Gateway Film Center right there on campus. We're going to be doing, once again, we're going to be taping the podcast live. Lots of great prizes, lots of fun. We're going to be showing The Orphanage, which is such a great spooky
oh my God.
ghost story.
And it's so beautiful. I mean, it's such a gorgeous movie to watch that I'm very excited to get a chance to show it to people on a big screen.
Yeah.
It'll be awesome.
And we'll count down the top 5 Spanish language horror films.
That's right.
So there's some good ones there. So good stuff coming up. Hope you can make that if you're in our area. And if not, well, as always, keep the conversation going on Twitter. We are at Mad Wolf, MADDWOLF on Facebook. That is Mad Wolf Columbus. And also, if you listen to us on iTunes, rate us.
That's right. Give us a rating, preferably a good one. But you know what? Just be honest. Give us a rating. You can also, we're hosted by Golden Spiral Media. They have a ton of really great podcasts, including our friend Corey Metcalf's Triple Cast. So you can pop over there, listen to some of the other podcasts, and you can leave us a comment at Golden Spiral Media as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we would like to know, what filmmaker, or it could be also an actor or actress, somebody who's had a good career in horror that you feel like deserves an entire podcast. And Cronenberg has come up actually several times. We've had several recommendations for that one. And then just this week on Twitter, Stephen Perez recommended Val Lewton. And I would not have thought of that, but wow, that's quite a career. And that'll be an interesting thing to maybe talk about.
And he was seconded. He had a couple of retweets on that. So, Stephen, good thoughts there. That's one to consider. So until then, next week, it is Takashi Miike, the top 5. That should be good. And this is the Fright Club podcast.
I'm Hope Madden.
And I am George Wolf from madwolf.com. Until next week.
Stay frightful, my friends.